Let's talk about the role of AI in the United Healthcare CEO shooting. Headlines like these are showing up all over the place, bringing to light a story of litigation that's playing out right now in the court system tied to how United Healthcare was using AI in their denial process. Whenever I see these kind of headlines, I start to kind of think like, oh, okay, so they're like jumping on the bandwagon of fear along with negativity to push this story even further. So I wanted to do some digging into what some of the claims were in these and kind of help paint a picture of where I think things have gone wrong. When you start reading the stories, a lot of them are citing that United Healthcare deployed an AI solution that had a 90% error rate that was denying all sorts of sick patients coverage. But the idea that any company would use a solution that has a 90% error rate didn't fully pass the sniff test to me. But that is the claim that was made in the case that was brought against United Healthcare, specifically about denial processes that ultimately led to the death of patients. But that 90% claim isn't across all claims that the AI solution touched. It's a 90% overturn rate of claims that were appealed. Now, that's still not an impressive rate, and that implies that 90% of the time that a human was put back into the loop, the decision was reversed. But then I wanted to understand what CMS's regulations around the use of AI strictly without human intervention for denials were, so I went to go look. And it looks like they didn't have any sort of policy put in place until this year after these cases were introduced, which honestly is a bit surprising to me because when I was working with Medicare providers, there were pretty stringent rules around how they could use technology and what the accuracy rate of that technology needed to be, even for things like data capture off of forms. So the idea that there was no policy requiring there to be any sort of human intervention in denials is really surprising to me. So then I went digging to try and figure out what United Healthcare's reversal during appeals process looked like before they implemented this AI solution, and I couldn't find any data about them specifically. But at a CMS level across all of their Medicare providers, what I'm finding is that 13% of adverse decisions were overturned upon appeal when they were driven by humans. So that 90% rate is pretty staggeringly high in comparison to what I'm finding was the average when there wasn't AI involvement. So the good news is that CMS has passed a rule that any Medicare provider cannot make the decision of a denial solely on the use of an algorithm or technology, and that a human does have to be in the loop. But it took a massive lawsuit for them to get to the point where they put that regulation in place in the first place. So while some of these headlines are a little misleading in terms of insinuating that there was a 90% error rate across the board rather than just on the appealed cases, it's still a pretty strong case that this was a misuse of the technology. That does not mean that I condone any sort of violence against people or companies where we feel like AI or technology is being misused. It's actually really sad to me that we've reached that point. But this is a scenario where a company took an AI first approach rather than a human first approach and decided that the technology could manage something that it clearly can't on its own. And for us not to end up in this dystopian world, we have to figure out a way for us to put humans first as we're leveraging this technology. And especially in the use cases that are tied to health or safety of people, we can't wait for litigation to be what ignites us to put some sort of guide rails or regulation up in place. It's time for us to start getting proactive about shaping the future that we want instead of hoping and praying that it finds its way forward through our legal system.